love. The full moon Gurupurnima also represents a mind that's filled with illumination and purity. Both of these are only possible if we have a guru in our lives. Hence, we dedicate this day to our guru, our spiritual teacher. So today, in the spirit of gratitude to my guru and God, I thought I would share with you all what I have gleaned in this journey of life, looking at it from a worldly lens, a scientific lens as a psychiatrist, as well as a spiritual lens. So while Swami came into our lives in the late 80s through a picture that was presented to my father from one of his friends who was an ardent devotee of Sathya Sai Baba. It was not until 1999 that kind of culminated into my first trip as a part of the Sathya Sai International Organization, kind of the medical camp that got me to Parthi. So in hindsight is always 20/20, as they say. Looking back, there have been many tears, many prayers that I've offered in front of this picture, not comprehending kind of the aspect of divinity at that time, all of which then resulted in many wishes being granted throughout those years from the 80s through 1999. Now, before I talk about the first trip to Puttaparthi, on this Guru Purnima day, I thought I'll start off with my second trip to Prashanti Nilayam. This happened to be on Guru Purnima. This was my second trip in 2000. And, I was just getting to absorb it all, get a sense of what the rules were in Prashanti Nilayam as a part of the medical camp, sitting in Sai Kulwant Hall in Prashanti Nilayam. And Swami the music begins, and Swami obviously comes from his residence, you could literally see him glide through. And the first day, I happened to sit in the front row, and he materializes Vibhuti and gives it to me. So that was my first day during those Guru Purnima celebrations. It had this kind of proximity to divinity. The same trip, a number of my colleagues who happen to be physicians had all been part of this Paduka festival over the years. And they were all very eager to some of them who hadn't had Padukas, they were planning to get some. And I also had this intense urge and yearning to get a pair of Padukas that I could bring back to the United States. So this way I can hold on to it as a transitional object. My sister, who also happens to be a physician, she just had a baby. And so I said, let me also get her a pair of Padukas, so that this way we were able to take those pairs of Padukas into the Sai Kulwant Hall. During those times, they would allow us to do that. And not very often does it happen that you end up getting the front row again, twice in a row within a span of 7 days. This happened to be Guru Purnima 2000, the year 2000. So Swami, again, very beautifully, I very vividly remember this, is coming from his residence into Sai Kulwant Hall. He's on the other side of the darshan line. And you could literally see him walk past where I was. And for quite a distance, he goes on the other side of the darshan line. And by then I had pretty much reconciled to and consoled myself that, just having those Padukas in his presence is blessings enough. Right when I was having those thoughts, Swami, who had gone quite a distance from where I was seated, comes diagonally towards where I was seated and puts both of his hands on the Padukas that I was holding on to. And that to me, as they say, was truly blissful, ananda. And when I experienced that, a quick thought went through my mind, which was like, since I've experienced this, I need to give this pair of Padukas to my sister, who clearly could not make it to the medical camp. Just when I had that thought, Swami moved forward to the other pair of Padukas that my friend was holding on for my sister. He went in, placed both of his hands on that set of Padukas, and then left. So that was my Guru Purnima experience. And clearly, when you look at this, can't be a coincidence. Here I am talking to you all on Gurupurnima 20 years later. Immaculate planning by our Guru and by the Lord. Let me now get back to 1999. That was my first trip. So the first trip, again, I had absolutely no idea about what kind of, what Prashanthi Nilayam was. I had learned a little bit, read a bit about Swami, but this was my first experience kind of landing in Prashanthi Nilayam. And we ended up coming to Prashanthi Nilayam on the 19th of November, 1999. And that happens to be Ladies' Day. So we went in to the accommodation office, and of course they said they had no rooms. So my parents and I, we just got up, and as we were about to leave, I have this kind of conversation that I'm having, wherein, you come this far, this is my first trip, and there isn't even a room that I can kind of, stay in. Just as you're processing that, having this, as they say, conversations with God, the gentleman from behind kind of calls us back and says, "Are you all a family?" We said, "Yes." And he said, "We have a room for you." So we ended up getting a room with hot water. So that was my first experience in Puttaparthi in Prashanthi Nilayam. And about 16 years later, as Jean mentioned, on Swami's 90th birthday, I happened to speak on Ladies' Day in Prashanthi Nilayam. So now our family, when we look back at things like this, they no longer are coincidences. Very often we kind of speak to that as psi incidences. As a woman of science and a neuroscientist, we've encountered so many such that I now realize that where science ends, divinity begins. We have seen the hand of God in every act, in every moment. Having Swami as our Guru, as my guide to guard and steer me through this ocean of life has been the greatest blessing. On this Gurupurnima day, I need to mention this. Swami's role as a spiritual teacher has guided all onto the path of goodness and godliness. From when he was kind of at a tender age, when he started the Pandari Bhajan group, we're all familiar with those stories, starting the street theater, trying to talk about kind of scriptures, but also addressing contemporary social issues, trying to look at how do we bring about reform, equality, some of what we see around us today in the 21st century, injustice around us. He had already been talking about a lot of that throughout his kind of sojourn on this earth. One of the first bhajans, as you've all heard throughout the last 2 days, at a tender age was Manasa Bhajare Guru Charanam, Dustara Bhavasagara Taranam. O mind, take refuge at the feet of the Guru. He in turn will guide you through this ocean called life. He picked this bhajan for a reason, and that was to impress upon us the kind of, just the mere knowledge of the importance of a guru in one's life. Swami as a guru has always led by example. You see, throughout his teachings, Swami said kind of the divine role of parents as the first teacher, a mother, the role that she plays as the first teacher of the child, followed by the father. He also kind of asks the parents to remember to be exemplars as they are trying to execute this holy task of not just kind of molding their child onto the Godward path, but also shaping their character to be good citizens of the society or a nation. And he, as I stated earlier, truly led by example. He revered his mother and fulfilled her promise that he made to her through various initiatives that we are very familiar with: socio-care, educare, and Medicare. All of these have been executed miraculously and have no precedence in the history of mankind. Swami wants no hollow speeches, but sincere demonstration of love in practice, and his assertion is, "My life is my message," and he truly kind of, practiced what he preached. If you look at just one, social care, for example, what did he start with? Grama Seva, going to the villages and serving them. Grama Seva was so deliberate and thoughtful, the way in which he conducted it. So Swami didn't go about and say, I'm going to put in, kind of make sure that all of the kids from these villages go on to have free education. That's not how he started, or provision of medical care. He started off with basic necessities, which was food, making sure they had enough to eat, making sure they had a shirt on their back, clothing. Then came free education, which kind of culminated into this rural upliftment programs to providing vocational guidance. Then came free medication, blood donation camps, and all of that. So Swami kind of truly reminded us that even kind of more powerful than prayer is service. Swami says, Manava Seva is Madhava Seva. Service to humanity is service to God. And you see that even when he does Narayana Seva, Swami would literally bend down and serve the underserved. There's a beautiful story I'm reminded of in Kodaikanal. So Swami, as many of you are aware, so Kodaikanal clearly is the summer home of kind of, Swami, and there is his residence Sai Shruti. So Swami was visiting Sai Shruti, and this was around lunchtime. People were seated to be fed, and there was this little boy who was seated for lunch, and he took his hands and started cleaning the floor in front of him. Right at that moment, Swami enters. Swami goes to this little boy and asks him, "You're soiling your hands. You're about to begin eating." And the child says, "Swami, I saw some dirt out there, and I didn't want that dirt to stick onto your feet or to your robe. And that's the reason I was cleaning." Swami very swiftly took the child and started washing his hands, his soiled hands. And here was Narayana himself serving a Manava, or Madhava himself serving a Manava. So Swami has been a true exemplar of the attitude of servitude and gratitude. And that is this that we all need to imbibe into our daily lives. Let's take a look at the Medicare initiative that I alluded to earlier. General Hospital that he promised his mother was something that Swami truly kind of went on to execute. That was then followed by the Sathya Sai Institutes of Higher Medical Sciences, which truly provide yeoman service that these medical centers of excellence do provide to mankind across the globe. They're predicated on the basic Sai principles of universal healthcare, making sure everybody gets healthcare. Free healthcare. How often do you get free service, especially when it comes to health? Loving healthcare, suffused with humanism, respect, love, compassion, dignity, all of those infused into healthcare. Comprehensive healthcare, mind, body, spirit connectivity. That's so important in the line of work that we do. A disequilibrium of the mind, body, spirit can result in disease, not being at ease. So it can truly disrupt your health and wellness. Preventative health, trying to prevent one from kind of going on to develop a disease. And of course, medical camps that many of us have been a part of across the globe. All of this truly kind of boded very well with me as a healthcare professional. Now I'm going to kind of talk to you a little bit about one of the experiences I had at the super specialty. So while I had been kind of going to the medical camps over the years, around about 2004 through about 2014, around about a 10-year time frame, there was a hiatus. As things got busier, as I got busier at work, so I was not able to go. So 2014, I resumed kind of services back at the medical camp, and gets me to 2015. In 1999, while we were all driving through Puttaparthi, I had looked at this temple of healing, which falls on your right-hand side as you're driving from Bangalore towards Puttaparthi. And I had marveled at this beautiful temple of healing. had never had the opportunity to enter the super specialty until 2015. Talk about the hand of the Lord and his immaculate planning. So I ended up getting to be invited to be a speaker in 2015, January of 2015. And Dr. Voletti happened to be the medical director at that time. So while on the one hand, I was just simply kind of top of the world, but at the same time, I was a nervous wreck. I need to digress here just a bit and tell you that growing up as a child, I was always very timid, docile, never spoke up, very soft-spoken, and coming into the Sai fold has truly allowed me to kind of help develop one of those qualities in how to be a good public speaker. I'm reminded of Phyllis Crystal when she talks about how Swami provided her with the confidence to speak. So let me fast forward to 2015. So here I am. We get to the super specialty. We have a tour of the super specialty hospital. And then I'm taken to this large kind of hall, or the auditorium. And Dr. Voletti introduces me. So he gets off the podium, kind of go in, seek Swami's blessings. And I'm up on the podium. And as many of you know Dr. Voletti, he's a very tall man. I am not. I'm 5'4". So as I get to the podium comes till here. So normally I like to look at my audience, and I also just to kind of gauge their interest, gauge to see whether it's like, is my talk kind of really boring then. So when I got there, I realized this, and I didn't know what to do. So I said a very quick prayer, and I kind of stood on my great toe. So I used my toe as a support. And what you would not believe is that 1.5 hour long talk was all rendered based on the strength that my toes got from our beloved Lord. So no pun intended, quick thinking on your feet, on your toes in this kind of, in this regard. What I did not realize at that time was that this was a dress rehearsal for me. The same year was Swami's 90th birthday in November of 2015. So I was invited, as Jean mentioned, to speak on Ladies' Day on the 19th of November 2015 in Prashanti Nilayam. And that has its own kind of, I've had experiences and miracles happen during that visit, but that probably is a talk in itself. Let's get to Educare, where Swami truly personified each of the 5 values he preached: Sathya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, and Ahimsa. So you are looking at truth, right conduct, peace, love, and nonviolence. He taught us these values are the cornerstones of daily living. Education builds character. He set up these institutions, which now are deemed institutions, Sathya Sai Institutes of Higher Learning, where many of our Sai brothers and sisters have the, good fortune of training, getting their formal training, and being in the proximity of Guru. So it was not just getting education for life, but also life lessons, being in the proximity of the Lord. On the occasion of Gurupurnima, I think it's appropriate for all of us to pause here and consider the role of teachers. We've all had teachers that we're all grateful for what we are today. Similarly, in the Sai fold, we have Bal Vikas Gurus, who have played a phenomenal role in training children, trying to be a role model and building character. Swami often stated that teachers play a vital role in the development of an individual who are the future of a society. When I talked about kind of the 5 values that Swami often kind of talks about, love is one such value he is often emphasized and spoken at length about. What does he call us? Embodiments of love, Divya Swarupulara. People often talk about when Swami would come, there would be this pink aura of love that would extend across humans. when people would kind of, come in to seek his darshan. So love is the thread that binds humanity together. Now, through divine manifestation of love in practice, he's been able to transform slowly but steadily a nondescript hamlet, Puttaparthi, into a spiritual hub of the world. Prashanti Nilayam, the abode of highest peace. Every street resonates with the Vedas, the chantings, the bhajans. I'm reminded here of a beautiful song which goes like this. Bhajana Kirtana Nama Smarana Sai Pavanana Puttaparthi Pavana Triveni Sai Darsha Snan Sai Pavanana. So it talks about kind of the importance of bhajans, kirtana, and namasmarana, chanting of the name of the Lord, singing, but also the importance of Puttaparthi, which is compared to the confluence of the three holy rivers, which happens in Prayag, which clearly just being there, kind of having the darshan of the Lord is enough to wipe out all your sins. How fortunate are the residents of Prashanti Nilayam who experienced this each and every day of their lives. But look at the magnanimity of the Lord. Even for those of us who are at a distance, he has Radio Sai. For us to listen to Radio Sai, bhajans, kind of, various programs 24/7, so that we can tune our hearts and our mind to think, breathe, hear, feel him all the time. So it's up to us to how do we then start to create this Prashanti Nilayam with the indweller within ourselves. And that is important. I mean, with everything that we've all been through over the last 4 months, COVID-19, with the injustices around us, it's time for us to start to focus inward. And how do we start to kind of, practice some of what Swami has talked about to be able to get us to create the Prashanti Nilayam within. The beauty of Swami is that he's simplified life philosophies through bhajans. And one of the bhajans that he often sings is Hari Bhajana Bina Sukha Shanti Nahi. It has the answer to how we can incorporate every aspect of his teaching into our daily lives, no matter how difficult. So the 4 lines. Hari Bhajan Bina Sukha Shanti Nahi. The name of the Lord is what grants happiness and peace. Harinam Bhina Ananda Nahi. Chanting of the name of the Lord grants you bliss. Prema Bhakti Bina Uddhar Nahi. The ascent of man can only happen with love and devotion. Guru Seva Bhina Nirvana Nahi. Without kind of service to your Guru, you cannot attain liberation. So the answers are right there, if only we paid attention. Now, all of us are on a spiritual path, whether we know it or not. As spiritual aspirants, our first and foremost duty is to cleanse our mind. Now, when we cleanse our bodies, we do it with soap and water, right? For this inner cleansing, Swami has given us kind of the medication, which is Namasmarana, continuous chanting of the name of the Lord. And we have a number of examples throughout history, whether it was the transformative journey of Saint Valmiki or Angulimala, who kind of then followed Buddha, kind of the transformation that happened just by chanting the name of the Lord. There's a beautiful story here that Swami kind of often talks about of Sakubai. She was a saint from Maharashtra, the capital of which is Mumbai. So Sakubai came from a very poor family, and she had to go through a number of vicissitudes of life throughout her kind of when she came to her husband's house, being with her mother-in-law. But what she was an ardent devotee of Lord Panduranga. So no matter which task, which household chore she did, she would constantly be chanting the name of the Lord. So even when she made these cow dung cakes, as you know, dried cow dung is used as a fuel. for cooking. So as she would do that, she would kind of constantly chant the name of the Lord and say Rangaranga Panduranga. So one such occasion, one of the saints from Maharashtra, by Saint Namadeva, there were two brothers, Gyanadeva and Namadeva. So he happens to visit Sakubai's village, and he's heard a lot about her and her firm kind of conviction and her firm faith in God. So he comes in and kind of he's talking to her, and she is a simpleton, and she talks and tells her Namadev that as I was drying these cow dung cakes, so normally they have this kind of area that everybody dries their cow dung cakes. And she says, somebody has been stealing my cow dung cakes. He says, how do you know? Kind of, they all look alike. How do you know it's yours? So she says, she brings one of those dried up cow dung cakes and kind of gives it to Namadeva. So Namadeva holds on to that cow dung cake and puts it close to his ears. And from that reverberates Rangaranga Panduranga. That is the power of the name of the Lord. Even an inanimate object like cow dung cakes were able to imbibe the kind of chanting and the potency and the power that even an inanimate object could take on just by the chants of Sakuba is just incredible. And that is something we need to start to incorporate into our daily lives. Satsang is another. Swami often talks about kind of opening up of one of the faculties, the Hridaya Chakra, the heart chakra. We're not talking about open heart surgery here. It's talking about how do we open it up through good company, satsang. When you open your Hridaya Chakra, that in turn results in affection, compassion, more love, more devotion. In many discourses, Swami has talked about one of the kind of songs by Adi Shankara, who's clearly a well-regarded spiritual guru. One of the stanzas from Bhajagovindam goes like this: Satsangatve nissangatvam, nissangatve nirmohatvam, nirmohatve nischalatatvam, nischalatatve jivan mukti. What does that mean? From spiritual company comes non-attachment. From non-attachment comes freedom from delusion, which then leads to a contact with the changeless truth. That in turn bestows liberation. That's why satsang is so very important for each one of us. As they say, you become the company you keep. As a psychiatrist, I've always been kind of, quite truly amazed by the complexities of the human brain, the human mind. And Swami has talked at length in many of his discourses about the mind. I like this particular analogy of his that I really like, when he compares the human mind to a housefly. One moment, the housefly is kind of nibbling on sacred food. And the next moment, it flies, sits on a garbage dump and starts to feed the garbage. In a similar manner, man ponders between good ideas, positive thoughts for a minute, and then very quickly becomes disturbed, agitated, bad ideas, bad thoughts, the very next minute. And we're all guilty of doing something like that, right? We spend time kind of either going to a temple or attending the Sai Center for satsang, for bhajans, or visiting churches. And then once we set foot outside, back to kind of gossiping or kind of getting caught up with running with the kind of mundane materialistic things. I think the beauty of this avatarhood is that it's such a blessing that he's been able to simplify scriptures, life philosophies, allowing us to kind of understand at a layman's level. You don't have to be kind of, well-read in Sanskrit. You don't have to be an erudite scholar of the Vedas. Swami has also talked about kind of, since I'm a psychiatrist, there's a lot kind of, that I'll talk about with regards to the mind. So here he talks about the food that one eats affects one's mind. So let's talk about examples putting this into practice and what evidence do we have. So food that we eat affects our mind. As is the food, so is the mind. As is the mind, so are our thoughts. As are our thoughts, so is our conduct. As is our conduct, so is our health. So you see a connection between mind and overall health. Now, food here has a much broader connotation. He's not talking about just food that we consume. He's talking about the panchendriyas, the five senses, right? Sense of hearing, sense of sight, smell, taste, and touch. We don't have to go way kind of back. We can look at COVID-19. So kind of, all that we've all been through, the news cycles that we constantly are overwhelmed by, just kind of watching it over and over again, the tragedies that humankind has had to see over the years. So hearing and seeing this, that in turn can play a significant havoc on one's mind, which then affects your thoughts. Your thoughts, then it impacts your conduct, how you conduct yourself in the society with your near and dear ones, with your co-workers. That then has an impact on your overall health and well-being. There are examples, if you look back in mythology too. So there is this example of when Lord Rama was exiled, right? He went with Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana. Lakshmana followed his brother, left all the luxuries, and went, and they were going through this Dandakaranya forest. And that's where they end up meeting Shurpanaka, Ravana's sister. So as they were going through that forest, Lakshmana, all of a sudden, kind of this is quite out of character for him, kind of has this brief moment wherein he talks to Lord Rama and says that, I gave up all luxuries to be here and to live in squalor, and I have nothing, all that I'm doing is serving you. Rama doesn't say anything to this. As they progress through Dandakaranya forest, they enter into Chitrakuta. And Chitrakuta is where they established their their hut and lived there. So then Lakshmana realizes what just the toxicity of the environment. As you know, Dandakaranya was ruled by Khara and Dushana, brothers of Shurpanaka. They were demons. So even the environment of since it was demon territory, was infused with so much of toxicity that it even for somebody like Lakshmana, who was a part and parcel of the divine, he also it did end up affecting his mind and his words, eventually hurting his brother. And we saw that even when with COVID-19, when you had these lockdowns, people said that since there was no the pollution was significantly controlled, the smog levels went down, people could see the snow-capped Himalayas. Deaths due to environmental toxins also went down significantly. Other tools that Swami has provided is the Gayatri for cleansing our mind, chanting it at least 3 times a day. The beauty of Gayatri is that Swami says, Sarvaroga Nivarini Gayatri. Gayatri is the reliever of all diseases. Sarva Dukkha Pariharini Gayatri. Gayatri wards off all miseries. And Sarva Vancha Falashri Gayatri. Gayatri is the fulfiller of all desires. We heard the Gayatri mantra during the meditation that Jean played. Gayatri is the bestower of all that is beneficial. If the mantra is chanted, various powers will emerge in one. Another simple to use tool that Swami has provided is the Brahmarpanam mantra. There is a science and a spiritual aspect of Brahmarpanam. So let's take a look at both of those. Now, every religion offers, right? So they talk about the blessings that we need to receive before we consume food. So we should partake food with a sattvic mind, with a pure, serene mind. Don't consume food when you're agitated. Make sure at least you quieten your mind and then start to eat. Our ancestors, forefathers have always recommended the offering of food to God before partaking. And every religion, whether you look at Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, every pretty much does that. The food so partaken becomes prasadam or consecrated offering. Now, what does prayer do? Prayer cleanses the food of the 3 impurities. The first is caused by the absence of cleanliness in the vessel in which we cook. The second is the cleanliness of the food stuff that we put in. Let's say I'm cooking spinach. Now, the spinach was grown by a farmer, a lot of energies and thoughts that the farmer has poured into it, that then goes through the supply chain, into Walmarts or Publix, wherever we end up buying it, and then comes home. So kind of the cleanliness of the food and the energies that it draws, and then the cleanliness of the process of cooking. Let's say I'm angry at my mother and I'm kind of cooking. That anger, that rage goes into kind of the food that I'm cooking. So to be able to, so there's a lot of impurities that the food already has imbibed. So to be able to do that, the best way in which to purify it is by offering it to the Lord. Now, we know that, if you look at the Bhakti era saints like Meera, Saint Meera, what she did was she was so kind of, she was always preoccupied in kind of singing the glories of Lord Krishna. Even when she was offered poison by her brother-in-law, she offered it to the Lord, and that poison got to be converted to nectar when she offered it to the Lord. So it didn't really hurt her. Coming back to kind of the 21st century, in the early days, probably in the 70s that I recall having read, Swami had asked all his Brindavan campus college boys to join him for lunch. At this time, only about 100 boys were there, and this was probably around summer. So there was this professor from the United States, Dr. Frank Baranowski, who is a Korean photographer and who looks at auras around people. And he was invited for lunch. So there's a sumptuous meal that was fed, laid out in front of the kind of, all those who were seated. The boys were waiting for Swami to arrive. And so Dr. Baranowski started taking his camera and started taking pictures of the food that was in front of them. So later Swami comes in and the boys kind of, start reciting the Brahmarpana mantra, offering to the Lord before partaking the food. After the mantra was recited, Dr. Baranowski started snapping more pictures. Now what does he see? He sees a blue aura around the food. He was so excited. For somebody who kind of has believed in science with a scientific mind, he asked Swami for the reason for this blue aura around the food. Swami said, Brahmarpana mantra is a very powerful mantra, and after recitation, the food is converted into prasada, or consecrated offering. It often purifies the food and all items around it, not just the food, but also around it. So hence the importance of just making sure every day we're chanting the Brahmarpana mantra or offering it to the Lord before we consume food. So as you can see, his teachings are simple, yet profound and potent. Swami was truly an embodiment of his own message, love all, serve all. Just simple things, but he truly led his life by serving as an example. Help ever, hurt never. He touched hearts of millions, and you have heard Jean talk about this. When he was doing kind of the documentaries, talking about remote villages, tribes that he has gone into where the government hasn't reached, electricity hasn't reached, but Swami's love and grace has penetrated the hearts of these individuals. I'll talk about two such kind of miracles just to kind of experience God in one's life. So we were a few years ago, about a decade ago, we were visiting Arizona, and I was there for doing a continuing medical education. It happened to be that weekend, happened to be the wedding anniversary of my parents. So I ended up taking them along. And so we visited the Grand Canyon. And so the last day, we had a day before we kind of took the red-eye flight back to our destination. We decided to go to visit Old Town Scottsdale. And, normally when I'm traveling, I don't like to drive. So we kind of took a car service, and this gentleman pulled up at the hotel that we were at. We were all seated, and we started the conversation. And he has a very thick kind of Middle Eastern accent, and he starts to talk. So he said, where are you all from? We said, India. He said, Bangalore? We said, yes. And he said, Sai Baba. We were all taken aback. And then he narrates his story about his wife, who is a Catholic. He's from Iran. She's a Catholic. How, as a child, when she was 5 years old, she'd been having these dreams of this individual in saffron robe with kind of afro hair. About 15, 20 years later, she ends going on a pilgrimage to India, and the group kind of takes her to Puttaparthi. She sees Swami and recognizes him as the individual who's been appearing in her dreams. She gets an interview on that trip, and she's had a couple of trips subsequent to that. She comes back, and then the two of them fall in love, get married, much against the wishes of their parents, given the fact they are from two different religions. And so he is insistent that we come visit his home. So we kind of, we tried to see if we could kind of politely decline, but then we ended up kind of accepting his invitation. We end up going to his home. It's a typical American subdivision. She opens the door. She's dressed in a white salwar kameez with vibhuti on her forehead, with bhajans playing in the background. So we had a very good satsang. Since it was a Sunday, we normally do bhajans at home. And so we ended up doing bhajans there. We exchanged birth dates, and we came back. Several months later, it happened to be my father's birthday the next day, and we received this beautiful kind of picture in an envelope from this couple. And my mother kind of called her up and said that, what a beautiful picture and what a wonderful gesture. So she thanked her, and what was surprising for this individual was that she said, I just mailed it from Arizona, which is obviously on the west side of the United States, to the East Coast less than 24 hours ago in first class mail. How did it end up arriving a day before his birthday? And we've had many such kind of, what we call kind of truly miracles. Another one was more recently, wherein one of my family had to be hospitalized. And, even though I'm a healthcare professional and I trained in India, I've never kind of sought healthcare services in India. So we wasn't very sure which hospital to take, kind of just had a cousin of ours drive us to this hospital, and constant prayers to the Lord. The family member had to be admitted to the ICU. So there I was, kind of, praying, kind of holding on to his feet. I get called to come into the ICU and to meet with the doctor, the first doctor who kind of laid eyes on this family member. And so it's the ICU, so they all had masks. And so and that very day, I was supposed to leave for Puttaparthi. So I kind of had this conversation. I said, I was supposed to leave for Puttaparthi early this morning. And of course, this happens. And then he looks at me. Of course, I can't see his expression. I could only see his eyes. So he looks at me, takes kind of a chain from underneath his scrubs, shows it to me and says, I also work at Super Specialty, and this is the kind of locket that Swami materialized for me. I heaved a sigh of relief. It was as if God was there every step of the way. And I can keep going, but in the interest of time, we'll kind of, we are very fortunate to be contemporaries of this avatar who truly has helped sanctify our lives. Many of us have been blessed with his divine vision, his divine touch, his divine discourse, and we all agree that one look by Swami is more than enough to get rid of all of our evil tendencies, to make us kind of, turn ourselves more Godward, inward. And COVID is a good example of that, from outward to inward, from inward to Godward. Swami, will always try to sow the seeds of divinity in our hearts. That sneak peek that I just talked about, for me, was a picture that came into our lives, just to kind of allow you to taste that sweetness. Each one of you has different experiences, but it's our duty as spiritual seekers and aspirants to water the seed and make it blossom. For me and my family, the greatest blessing of this Janma has been the entry of our Guru into our lives and his constant presence. There have been several lessons learned on this transformative journey. It's been his grace, his teachings that have taught me the value of incorporating human values of love, compassion, dignity into medicine in this personal and professional quest of mine of being a good physician, but also trying to be a better human being. He's made it more meaningful for me as a psychiatrist to understand the art and science of medicine, mind, body, spirit connectivity, viewing it through a spiritual lens by recognizing the divinity in each and every one of us. His unconditional love, ever-flowing grace has been through us through good times and not so good times. Practicing and living in his presence every single moment is the only panacea in one's life. What I've realized is that spirituality is not an activity, but a lifestyle, a lifetime commitment. We all need to pray for love of God. Divine love is the most powerful magnet. Pray to God with a pure heart, with a mind bereft of desires. Ask God for himself. If you do that, he'll give you everything you want. With divine love, you'll have prosperity and happiness. Only prayer to him and surrender at his lotus feet can transform us into Sai messengers, worthy of association with his mission. I will conclude with a bhajan which truly encapsulates the essence of Swami's life, his message. गुरु सेवा सा पुण्य नहीं, मानव सेवा सा दान, सबसे पूज्य है मात पिता, जो है ब्रह्म समान. हो गए हम तो ऋणी साई के, हम पे किया उपकार. With heartfelt gratitude to Swami and bowing to the divinity in each one of you. Thank you, Saira.